All right, what is good, ladies and gentlemen? It is the Mass Reviewer back again with another review, and today we are doing a review for Captain America, the First Avenger, aka the first Captain America film. Pseudo rewatch as it has been for the past few reviews, because again, a lot of the Phase 1 movies are just, I watched it like when I was really young, so I just don't remember a lot of the details. And so yeah, any other background I have to give? Not really, so let us just get into it, starting off with the plot. So the plot of this film is that we follow the protagonist, Steve Rogers, who wants to serve in the army. He is like a very morally good person, and he just wants to play a role in serving in the army in order to help his country. Like, his whole motivation is standing up to bullies, and so this takes place during World War II, and he is not physically fit to really enlist in the army. He has asthma with a bunch of other like health problems, so he is not fit to serve in the military. And so, but he ends up, him and his friend Bucky Barnes, who is in the army, they end up talking, and then Steve kind of like tells Bucky about how much he wants to serve and stuff, and how he's like, he's gonna keep on trying to enlist and stuff, and he gets overheard by Dr. Abraham. I forgot his last name. It's like Eriskay, something like that, but Dr. Abraham basically. So Dr. Abraham ends up hearing about this, and so he himself is the head of the super soldier program, where he is looking for a morally good soldier, because the super serum has the effects of basically amplifying certain tendencies in a person. So basically, whatever is inside of a person, it will like be amplified. So a morally good person, like he describes it this way: a good person becomes great, a bad person becomes worse. That's basically how the super serum works. And so I guess technically the way it would have worked in Hulk is that I don't know. I'm assuming just in terms of like the Hulk for those movies, it's also technically like meant to be super soldier serum, but I guess I don't know, just the gamma radiation involved somehow caused it to create different outcomes. But anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about. So yeah, so Steve Rogers ends up he goes to boot camp. He is not really the strongest, definitely, but he is still, like, he portrays himself as being, like, you know, pretty smart in certain situations, crafty, and he is still a morally good character. So he ends up going through the super soldier program, and he becomes Captain America. And at first, he becomes basically just a poster boy for the U.S. military in order to help promote the cause of serving in World War II. And eventually, though, he hears about the one. I think it was the 107th Squadron that ended up getting captured by Hydra. Hydra is the enemy of the film. They are headed by Red Skull and his assistant Zola. Basically, they're like the Nazi scientists of Adolf Hitler, I guess, and so they are working towards creating. They're like, Hitler appointed them to create weapons, but Red Skull's ultimate motive is to use the Tesseract, which he ends up finding at the start of the film. He is using the Tesseract in order to create, I guess, weapons that I think his old goal is basically, from what I understood, is basically just world domination. He wants to destroy the whole world, take it over, something like that. It's a generic kind of that guy stuff, I would say. So anyway, so yeah, Bucky's troop ended up getting captured by Hydra, and so Steve Rogers goes on a solo rescue mission in order to save everyone, and he does so successfully. And so from there, the U.S. military actually gives him more of a major role in actually serving. He gets promoted to captain, and so from here, his goal is, like, he's actually just working now with the U.S. military in order to stop Hydra. So from this point, they go to, I'm not sure exactly after. I'm pretty sure after they saved Bucky. At this point, we start getting into the third act already. I'm pretty sure, unless I'm misremembering. But anyway, at this point, Howard Stark is also pretty prominent in this film. He ends up giving Steve. He's the one that like provides Steve with his vibranium shield, and he also helped Steve with the actual rescue mission for Bucky and the rest of the troop and stuff. And so, yeah, they go on like some other missions to destroy a bunch of Hydra bases, but then eventually they go for. They're trying to capture Red Skull himself, so they end up, there's like a mission that involves a train, and Bucky goes along with Steve. Bucky ends up falling out of the train in the process because there's like Hydra soldiers that cause explosions and stuff. Anyway, Bucky ends up falling into the water, and I mean, spoiler alert, if you know what happens with the rest of the MCU, Bucky is going to return. So anyway, Steve, at this point, we get into the third act of the film, where Steve arrives at I think he gets to the Hydra base, and I think the other U.S. soldiers, he ends up getting captured. I think Red Skull like confronts him. I think early in the film, by the way, Steve also confronted Red Skull. I'm kind of like, as usual with these recaps, I'm kind of going a bit out of order, but at some point, Steve did confront Red Skull when he was saving Bucky and the rest of the soldiers, and so. Yeah, at this point, they get confronted once again. Red Skull is planning to kill Steve. I also forgot to mention, but Zola ended up getting captured at an earlier point, and so he ended up getting not interviewed, he ended up getting interrogated by the colonel that is kind of like one of the prominent characters in the film, and he reveals Red Skull's plan in order to use the Tesseract to power a bomb to destroy New York City, basically. So, yeah. The final act occurs, some action goes on, and Red Skull's ultimate plan is to use a plane to, fly to New York City in order to drop a bomb, and so the final fight kind of happens between Red Skull and Captain America, and it ends with, I think, the Tesseract ends up, like, getting out of its containment unit thing that is powering the bomb, I guess, or maybe the ship itself, and so Red Skull, he ends up holding it, but then because he is, like, not worthy, I guess, like, he's not capable of holding it, so he does end up getting teleported, and once again, if you have seen the MCU, and specifically Infinity War, then you do know what ends up happening to him, so, but we'll save that for when we get to Infinity War, I guess. So, yeah, Red Skull is now gone and defeated, I guess. The Tesseract is, I guess, so hot that it ends up, like, falling through the plane, so it falls into the ocean. And Steve, he doesn't have time to really reroute the plane, or he has to, like, stop the plane from hitting New York City, so he ends up crashing the plane into the ice that, it's kind of weird, I don't actually know where he is, to be honest, on the map, because he's, like, near New York City, but he crashes the plane into some ice that's, I guess, nearby, but I'm not sure where nearby. I'm pretty sure there's nowhere near New York City that has ice, although I'm not a geographer, so maybe I'm wrong about that, but anyway, so Steve Rogers ends up crashing the plane, and he is basically in cryostasis, I'm pretty sure that's the term, where he is basically frozen asleep in ice for 70 years, and the film ends with him waking up. He's in modern day. Nick Fury basically, like, is now recruiting him and preparing him for the Avengers, and then there is a post-credit scene where the actual post-credit scene of this film is actually a teaser trailer for the Avengers, which came out the following year. So anyway, overall, the plot, I'm going to give it, I would say, it's an alright plot. It's good. I liked it. I would say that I don't want to give it a 4 out of 5. I'm just going to give it a 3 out of 5. It's like the story of Steve Rogers going from a wimpy, scrawny, like, kid that just wants to do good and turning into the hero of America, basically Captain America. I do like that aspect. The other aspect of Red Skull, it feels a bit generic, I would say. Just just wants to kind of take over the world, is using the Tesseract to do it, and he's not it's not the most interesting, I would say. But the actual, like, World War II stuff, it's alright, I would say. Like, going on missions in order to defeat what are essentially Nazis, like, they are Nazis. Hydra are just, like, a different they're like a different faction of Nazis. So I think that it was an alright plot. I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5. I might be a bit harsh, but I would say 3 out of 5 for the plot, I would say. In terms of the characters, I think Steve Rogers was great. Peggy Carter, she was the love interest of Steve. Again, another Marvel romance I just don't really care for too much, but she was fine, I would say. I did like that she actually felt like a military general. I'm not sure what her position was, lieutenant, captain. I don't know military ranks, but yeah, she was good in the roles that she played as I guess she was a fine love interest. I just don't really care for the romance aspect of it. But then she did good in her role of actually, like, supporting Steve when he was kind of going against military orders, I guess. The actual colonel himself, played by Tommy Lee Jones, I think was also pretty good. I actually did like his character a lot. Bucky, it was nice seeing him, even though he wasn't as prominent. He's going to be later on. I'm definitely going to like him in future installments of the MCU where he does play a more prominent role. Who else is there? The other, like, the entire troop of soldiers that Steve ends up saving, I think that they were pretty good as well. There was that one guy, the dude that played the character in The Wolf of Wall Street, which I forgot that he was in this film, so that was surprising to see. So who else was there? Howard Stark, I think that he was a nice addition. I also completely forgot that he was actually in this film, so that was cool to see, like, his role in just also kind of supporting Steve with whatever it is he needs and stuff. I thought that was cool to see, like, a younger version of this character that we have seen in the Iron Man films before. So there is also Stanley Tucci's character, Dr. Abraham, who I thought was also great. I think that he's kind of like, he played the same role as I forgot his name, but the scientist dude from the original Iron Man movie. He played the same kind of role of helping out, like, kind of inspiring Captain. Dr. Abraham in this film inspires Captain America the same way. What was his name? I'm gonna check his name real quick. Right, his name was Yinsen. So Yinsen is kind of like Dr. Abraham in this film is kind of like the parallel to Yinsen from Iron Man. So I thought that role was also very good, I would say. And Red Skull himself as a villain, again, he is just kind of like not really one of my favorites. I guess he is also he also has the super soldier serum, but in the process it did end up, like, ruining his face because it was not, at the time it wasn't completed. So he's not really one of my favorites. He's just like a Nazi that is just wants to destroy the world, and yet it's kind of generic. I didn't really care for it too much, I would say. Zola, he was a bit more reasonable, I guess, and so I did like Zola a bit better, I would say. But he was fine, I guess, the role he served, which was kind of like helping out Red Skull, but then eventually it's like he does end up kind of like giving information to the US because he doesn't really have a choice. So yeah, overall the characters, I would give probably, I would say I'd go like a 6 out of 10, I'll say, above average characters, but nothing, not my favorite, I would say, but yeah, 6 out of 10 will go. In terms of the settings, so a lot of the settings, you do have like 1940s Brooklyn, which I guess is a nice setting to see. There is like the military training camps, which look fine, I guess. There is the actual World War II setting of like when they're in Europe, and there's military camps there, as well as the Hydra bases and stuff. I don't really care for the Hydra bases too much, honestly. They're not really my favorite location. But the military areas, I guess it does fit the vibe of like the World War II setting, I would say. So in terms of these settings, I'm just going to go probably I'm just going to go like a 5.5. I'm going to be harsh with it. I'm going to say it was decent, but yeah, I don't really, again, these kind of, it didn't feel like extremely great World War II setting, something it didn't compare to, I don't know, something like Saving Private Ryan. I think I like the World War II kind of settings of that film a bit better than this one, where it was just kind of basic military camps, and the Hydra bases weren't really my favorite, I would say. I did like the train setting, actually. The train setting was decent, I would say. So yeah, just 5.5 for the settings. It was decent settings, but nothing too amazing. In terms of the action, it did feel like, especially coming off of, well, I mean, the last film I saw was X-Men First Class, but before that, Thor, like an actual MCU film, like Thor and Iron Man, it felt like those films didn't have as much actual action being portrayed, and this film did feel pretty loaded with a good amount of actual action of Steve Rogers like fighting off just like Hydra soldiers and stuff, whereas in Thor, a lot of the film, it's like there is the sequence at the start, but then he does lose his powers for most of the film until the end, where then there's some action again. But in this film, there is actually like a good amount in the middle. Like at the start, there's not really action, but then in the middle section, all the way up until the end, there is a decent amount of action. I do like Steve Rogers' action sequences. They are pretty cool anytime that he is using the shield. He ricochets it off walls and stuff. I think that it is cool. Just the fact that he's a super soldier in general, I think super soldiers are pretty cool in the MCU, just like soldiers that have heightened abilities and stuff, like run faster, fight stronger and stuff. I think that it is cool. And yeah, I didn't really care too much for the Tesseract weaponry. It was pretty, I don't know, just kind of basic, I would say. Like it would shoot, it created sometimes like big explosions and stuff, and it was able to like disintegrate soldiers on impact. Not really my favorite. I didn't really care for it too much. Besides that, there was like some actual guns and stuff, which it felt, it's all stuff we've seen before. So the actual like Captain America action I did like a lot, but would say that the rest of it was just kind of generic, I would say. So I would average it off with like I'll go like a 6 out of 10. I'll say above average, but yeah, definitely in later films I think they get a bit more creative as well with the Captain America's like fights, I would say. So anyway, in terms of the worst thing I would say is, I guess I didn't hate Red Skull, but I also didn't really care for him as a villain. He felt a bit generic. I'm going to probably give him like even so, I would still say he was like I'm thinking like between a 5 to a 5.5. I would say it was between like not good or bad, but a bit more leaning on the good side. And so I'm just going to give him a 5, honestly. I'm going to be harsh. I'm just going to give Red Skull a 5. I didn't really care for him as a villain too much. He felt, I don't know, he didn't, I guess somewhat villainous, like, but yeah, not really anything too interesting. In terms of the best thing, I would say probably like just Steve Rogers as a whole. Anytime Steve Rogers is like interacting with the military, like at the start, him actually going through the super soldier arc and stuff, and like him in the like actually in boot camp and stuff, him proving himself to be like a worthy candidate for the super soldier serum, him being the mascot for the military, and then ultimately him going on the mission in order to save the soldiers, and then he returns to camp and stuff. Anything that kind of stuff where it's like Steve Rogers actually in the military, I did like that, and him like trying to get into the military. So I would say like I don't know about the character of Steve Rogers as a whole. It's more specifically I would say that I liked his journey in like the military. I guess so. I guess less of Steve Rogers as a character. I would say more of like Steve Rogers' journey throughout the film. I could say, I guess. So I could say Steve Rogers' arc. I guess that is what I could say for the best thing I would say. So I'll go with that. Yeah, and I would say that it was. I'm going to say it was good. I'm just going to be a bit harsh with them. I'm just going to call it 6.5. I would say it was a good arc that Steve kind of went through of like becoming Captain America. I guess the events that took place throughout the film that turned him into, I guess, Captain America. I would say that it was a 6.5. And I did not write any extra notes for the film, so I'm going to do the calculations. So King Crimson. All right, so it ends up coming out to about a 6 out of 10, which would be above average. And I think I'd probably give it like between a 5.5 to a 6. I think I would say it was between decent and above average. And I think I will be pretty generous. I'll just call it a 6, the baseline score that it got. And so yeah, 6 out of 10. I'll say this, that I did think that it probably was better in the first and second half, and once you get to like the third half, the third the third act of the film, it does feel a bit generic with like just a lot of kind of generic action going on, and then up until you get to like the actual decision that Steve has to make to crash the plane. But there is like a kind of a bit of a section at the end that does just feel like a bit of generic action and stuff. So like leading up to the actual climax of the film. So yeah, overall, I would say, I'm being generous. I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10 because the start is very good. I would say the middle section as well. And just overall, yeah, I would say that this film was above average. So 6 out of 10, that's what I'm going to go with. And yeah, that is pretty much all there is to it. So if you have any recommendations, any shows, movies, video game stories, anime, manga, web series, anything that you want me to review, leave it in the comments and I will maybe possibly check it out. With that said, that is pretty much all there is to it. So let's leave it at that.